Hey everyone, Roxanne here. Hi, Sam, welcome. Thank you for hopping on. So today's topic for my Money with Me work session is how to get 1 month ahead financially. Now we're going to talk about, what does that mean to you? There's different ways to define 1 month ahead. So I'm interested to hear what your goal is for this. Is it going to be 1 full month of spending? Is it going to be 1 month of just your necessities? Is it essentially just to get out of like the paycheck to paycheck cycle, kind of identifying the dollar amount that's associated with that? So for example, we spend about $3,300 per month is our annual amount averaged. But really our necessities are about $2,000 a month. That's like our regular day-to-day spending. So if I'm saying how to get 1 month ahead financially, I would need to say, okay, does that mean I need to have $3,300 set aside, or does that mean I need to have $2,000 set aside? And let's see. So why might a person want to get a month ahead? Certainly there are many good reasons: reduction of stress, wanting to have more security or peace of mind. And for today, we are going to do the regular 3-session format. There'll be 3 5-minute long silent work sessions. I'm also going to do an intro this time where I'll ask questions and you'll want to think through kind of the prompts as we go. And then I always save time at the end for question and answer. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the comments as we go, or you're welcome to save them for that Q&A session. Now, I asked last time if you guys would put in the comments replay if you're catching the replay, and it was nice to hear from a few of you. So if you're catching the replay, you should comment replay. I actually started a few conversations under that. So it's always nice to interact with you guys, know what you're doing, and what you would like help with, what you're trying to get out of watching videos like this on YouTube. So starting by defining a goal. Now, a lot of this content is content prompts and content that I use for all kinds of goal setting, financial or not. So the first part is really to be specific with the goal. So identifying, like I mentioned, how much money do you spend each month? Deciding if you are going to try to save up an entire month of expenses or just a partial month. And you're going to want to give yourself a deadline or a time frame. So, you might say, I want to have this amount by the end of this month, and then this amount by the end of this month. Essentially, giving yourself deadlines for things just helps so that you don't procrastinate. I've been guilty of that, procrastinating goals that I have a very far future deadline on. So it's nice to know when you need to have it accomplished. And then what you can do is break down the amount by month and by paycheck. So that way you know how much you need to have set aside in order to hit this goal of having your 1 month of expenses set aside. You want to know, where are you going to keep the money? So a couple of common ones would probably be in checking or savings. You could, let's say you're trying to set aside $2,000 or to have the 1 month ahead. You could have that in your savings and just have it be separate. You can keep it in your checking. Historically, I have done just in my checking. So 1 month ahead in my checking account. So that way it's essentially ready to go. It's kind of like just carrying that balance in there at all times. And then new money coming in just goes out to pay expenses. So there's a few different ways to look at it. And so you'll want to kind of decide, how are you going to manage that? What is that going to look like? And I have this little tip where I would say things like 2,000 is the new zero. kind of like orange is the new black. 2,000 is the new zero. So that means in my checking account, if I have $2,500, I essentially only have $500 because that 2,000 is the new zero just means that that's money that I am not going to be touching right now. So that would be one way to handle it. Certainly, I think that you could prepay some of your expenses and just be a month ahead, kind of like make prepayments on like your utilities. So I'm interested what this means for you. You know, how were you thinking of it? Is that how you want to have it set up? And the other thing is you want to make sure that you have a powerful why statement behind the goal. So that's essentially the deeper reason. You know, maybe you're tired of feeling behind. I've certainly felt like that before. Wanting to reduce stress, making sure that you have a motivating why. So let me give you an example. For a long time, I had a goal to make $1 on the internet, like make $1 of online money. And I didn't really identify why I wanted to do it other than so that I could make some side hustle income. Well, it turns out that is not a very compelling goal for me since I never really took much action at all towards that goal when I had it. I eventually gave up and, I focus more now on, what actions can I take to just position myself to make money online. So just focusing more on like signing up for a particular app or, some kind of site where I can earn income. So you want to make sure that you have a powerful why statement that'll help pull you towards the goal and keep you motivated towards that goal. And you'll want to have a goal statement. So instead of just saying, I want to be 1 month ahead financially, you would say something like, my goal is to have 1 month of spending, which equals $3,300 in my checking account by September 1st. So that just makes sure that it's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the SMART acronym for goal setting, but just making sure that you have it all parsed out so that way you know where you're going and you can make sure that you are making progress. One of the common goals people set for their finances and a really common New Year's resolution is save money. And I think you can tell, just based on save money compared to my goal is to have 1 month of spending, $3,000 in my checking, like it's much more specific. And with the goal of saving money, it's really debatable. You can go back and forth on, am I making good progress towards this goal? Or, I personally have gotten into the habit a lot where if I have a vague goal like that, just kind of constantly beating myself up and it's like never enough progress. I don't know if you guys have experienced that before, but oh, hello from Poland. Cool. I don't know how to say your name. Uberju. I studied Chinese a little bit, and so instantly when I read things, I just think of like the Chinese written form. So I apologize. But hi, welcome. Thank you for joining. And we're just talking about goal setting because if you are trying to get 1 month ahead financially, you're going to want to structure it in a way that is going to increase your likelihood of success. So making sure that the goal is specific and measurable. So that way you always know, are you making progress on it? Are you on track? Instead of, setting a vague goal like to save money where, it's always going back and forth on, am I doing enough? And making sure you're still making progress. Oh, it's one of those days, isn't it? So hopefully that helps you to think through kind of making the goal more specific before we get into brainstorming, what kinds of things you could do to make more and save more money. what kind of things you could do for an action plan. So we will come up with actual like processes that you can adopt and habits and actions that you can adopt that will support this goal. I really am a big believer that we need to have we need to focus on daily habits and rituals and making it daily instead of just focusing on these big goals that can feel so overwhelming. Okay, that's not my name. It's a made up nickname. Okay, well, I like it. Whatever, however you say it. Uperiju. I'm just gonna say it differently every time, so. Oh, hi. Okay, same thing. Mandaraj. I'm so sorry, people. Hello. Oh, made it. Hello, Roxanne from New York. Audrey. Okay, hi, Audrey. Great. I can say that. I hopefully am saying it right. Welcome. Thank you. All right, so let's get prepped for the first session. So the first session is going to be, what could I do to make more money and to spend less money? So this is just going to be a brainstorming session, going through this prompt that I really like to use. And I think I've mentioned this before, but when I was broke and unemployed, I remember asking myself, if the money I have right now had to last for the next 2 months, how would my actions change? What kinds of things would I do so that the money I have now could stretch without any more income? Now, this question was really helpful to me because I was able to then, just brainstorm and come up with some ideas of things that I could do. And then I actually implemented some of those things into my regular life. So some of the things I came up with were walk to work instead of driving. And now I know not everyone is fortunate enough to be, like a half a mile from their job. And it was during the summer months, so that made it a lot easier because winters in Montana can be a little rough, but you said Mandaraj correctly, my band. Okay, that's cool. I like it. What instrument do you play? That's awesome. So making sure that the prompt that I went through. So the prompt I went through, how would I act if the money I have right now had to last for the next 2 months? I implemented some of those things, and then I was actually able to save that money towards my emergency fund and eventually, getting 1 month ahead on bills. So that's a good question to go through. I would say make sure that you're focusing on the big 3 expenses. So most people spend the most money on housing, transportation, and food. So anytime you are looking to see big progress, trying to do a difficult, to hit a difficult financial goal, like essentially trying to get out of paycheck to paycheck, you want to look at those big costs because you're going to see the most kind of bang for your buck, the most benefit from, taking action in those 3 areas. Oh, that's a very good question. Thank you. I would definitely spend money differently. Yeah, and it actually makes you to think through your actual spending and actual income the same, or to look through your actual spending that you have, not like this theoretical, what could I do? It's like, okay, here's the expenses that I have. What can I do to stretch these dollars? It's actually like, what things can I cut out? What things can I swap out for less expensive things? And I did want to warn you, a lot of the times with clients, when we start looking at how to save money, people will kind of lean towards, I call it spending to save. So if you write up a list of things that you can do to save money, and it's a shopping list of things to buy, then you want to be careful because that can be counterproductive to the goal of saving money. So an example of this, I had a client tell me that he was going to buy a Keurig to save money on coffee, buy a bike to save money on gas. And gosh, there was one other thing he mentioned. So just be careful of that habit. If you are kind of new to setting goals like this, that kind of instinct of, oh, okay, how can I spend money to fix this? Just be careful of that. Certainly it's okay to do some of those things. Just make sure that you're not buying a lot of things in order to try to save money. Girl singer. That's awesome. I want to take singing lessons. That's one of my big goals coming up because I'm horrible. It's horrible and painful, so I want to take singing lessons, so that's really cool. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so focusing on the big three. As you're brainstorming, what could I do to make more and spend less? You know, you might have things like certain side hustles that you've been considering that you could work on. There's always decluttering. So what things do you have that you could sell and then set the money aside to be your 1 month of bills? No spend challenges are one that I love. You could do daily, weekly, no spend challenges. It's a little hard to identify how much money you save using a no spend challenge unless you are really dialed into how much you're spending each week on discretionary purchases. You could try cash envelopes. This is one that I haven't done, but I have several friends that have channels about how to use cash envelopes, and people say that that really helps them to manage the cash that they have for fun spending specifically. You could say something like, find 3 new frugal recipes, call companies for insurance quotes. Okay, bringing my lunch, that's a great one. Yeah, absolutely. Thinking through, you know, how can you set time aside every week to make sure that you're like preparing your lunches ahead of time so that way it's easier. Buying the food at Dollar Tree, nice. So using discount retailers. So a week's worth of food is basically 1.5 times my daily lunch cost. It saves so much money. I loved bringing my lunch to work. I think that's a great way to save money. So yeah, that's great. So I would challenge you guys to try to come up with 30. And I know that's a lot, but really just brainstorming the things that you could do, things in your spending that you could cut, things that you could do to make more money. The next phase of this will be going back through and kind of identifying which of them you will do, which of them you want to try out. But for now, just a brainstorming session on what kinds of things that you could possibly do. I watched one girl not spending money at all at Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. That might work. It's always a few bucks here and there. Oh, I like that. I've never heard of that before. So having certain days of the week that are always no spend days, that's an interesting one. I like that a lot. I usually will do like a no spend weekend. That's what I usually recommend to people who have never done it before. But I really like this because then it's kind of, you know, isolated on days where, you know, you are probably tired anyway. So, you know, if you're shopping when you're tired, it's kind of like shopping when you're hungry. You're going to be more likely to spend money. So I love that it's like midweek. Yeah, that's a really cool idea. Thank you. I love that. When I bring my lunch, I use that money to pay the principal on car loan, speed paying. That's awesome. Yeah, I always go back and forth on like, how do you manage the money that you saved? Like, I've never really, I mean, when I was paying off debt, I would say any extra money is going towards my 6% student loans, for example. But then after that, I haven't really connected things like that, like what so you said to pay the principal on my car loan. Because you could do that with everything. You could say the money that I am saving during this challenge is going towards this vacation, for example. And I think that helps motivate people too. If you have exciting goals for things that you want to do, like have your car paid off. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. Other ones would be like reading a book about money for 5 minutes per day to stay motivated, creating a budget, just anything that you can think of. And I've talked about it a lot. Let's go ahead and start our first work session. So if you are just hopping on, welcome. You are welcome to work on whatever financial tasks you need to get done right now. If you would like to follow along with the prompt is brainstorming what could you do to make more money and what could you do to spend less money. Okay, if you guys are ready, we'll go ahead and 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, that is the end of work session 1. How did it go? I'm really interested to hear how many you came up with, how many ways that you could make more or save more. If you joined during the work session, I'll go ahead and recap as you guys tally up how many you came up with. By the end of this work session, you should have a full plan, a full action plan on how to get 1 month ahead with your finances. At the beginning, we talked about goal setting and making sure that your goal to get 1 month ahead is specific and measurable, making sure that you have a deadline. For the first session, we talked about brainstorming what could you do. So just coming up with ways that you could save money, because ultimately the things that you do on a day-to-day basis are going to determine whether or not you're able to set aside money in order to be 1 month ahead. Feel free to ask questions throughout if you guys had any questions from the first prompt. Did you guys want to share any of the tips you came up with? I know a couple of you already did. Now, this was a requested topic, so thank you to the person that asked. I wasn't sure if you were okay with it being public, that you were the one that requested it, just because it came in at the end of the last work session, so it wasn't made public in the comments or anything. So if you don't mind, you can feel free to share, but you don't have to. But anyway, so it was nice to kind of think through a question that you had this week and try to come up with, prompts for kind of how to answer that question, or trying to think of ways that would be helpful to you guys for kind of trying to get 1 month ahead. So thank you for that. If you guys ever do have ideas or articles to share and read together, feel free to message them in the comments or email me. My email is rocks@financerocks.com. Okay, so session 1 recapped. Let's see. The next session. So the next session is really strategizing and action planning. So I find that most people know what they need to do to improve their finances. I suspect several of you guys went through, and as you were filling out the prompt, I'm sure a lot of you were like, oh, okay, I could do this thing, I could do that thing. Ultimately, we know we need to reduce our spending, but really executing is the part that most of us struggle with. So for session 2, why don't you pick 3 to 5 of the ideas that you came up with above to kind of start with, to get started on, to try out. Now, I do always say, this is temporary. Don't feel like you have to commit to it forever. Maybe say, okay, I'm going to try cash envelopes for, maybe the next 2 weeks. Get the cash out, see how you like it, try out the process. Okay, I started the last paycheck setting 10% aside into a savings account. Yeah, okay, perfect example. Okay, so this is specific because it's 10%, so you can find, the exact dollar amount by multiplying. You identified where you're saving the money, so your savings account, and it's per paycheck. So really good example. That is a great one to set as a goal, to set aside 10%. So that's great. Try and reach 30. Yeah. I think that 30 is like the sweet spot. A lot of like financial professionals recommend like 10%, setting aside 10% of your money. And I just don't think that's enough. I think that these days that I think 30%, and certainly that can go towards paying off debt while you're paying off debt. And then once that's done, then that 30% can just be saved and invested. But I think 30% is a good goal. So why don't we pick 3 to 5 of the ideas, and preferably the ones with the most impact. So you can certainly sift through and say, I think that this one would bring a lot of benefits. And then there's going to be some ones that are easy ones. And I do always try to come up with a mix of each, right? A couple difficult ones to focus on, and then a couple easy ones sprinkled in that I can do simultaneously. And then you're going to want to ask questions like, what actions do I need to take to get this done? And it can be a lot of the times people feel overwhelmed starting this process. And I would say maybe just identify the one next thing that you need to do to get started. So, if you start thinking through it and you have a bunch of ideas on things that you need to do so for example, identifying a bunch of things that you need to do for a side hustle, kind of just focusing on the one next thing just makes it a little less overwhelming. I like to ask, what habits could I adopt that would make this easier? So thinking about your actual day-to-day routines and habits and saying, what could I do every day that would help me? So this would be things like reading an article on MSN Money every day. So just logging in, creating a habit of checking that, because that can help give you ideas on things to try going forward. It can give you advice on, kind of how to adopt better money habits. Those would be some examples. I like content ones. Other examples of daily habits would be like checking my bank accounts every day or tracking my spending every day. So trying to think of it in terms of habits is really helpful as well. I don't mind. I was reading through the YNAB website and I liked the idea. So I don't have to wait to get paid to pay my bills. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Sam. I was wondering if it was YNAB because I know that YNAB does have that feature where you can have money set aside for your current and then the next month. So that's cool. I was wondering that. If you guys are unfamiliar, YNAB stands for You Need a Budget. I think it's ynab.com. Is it ynab.com or is it youneedabudget.com? I apologize, I don't remember, but so these are tips that would kind of help that goal, trying to set aside money so that way it looks complete, right? All of your expenses for this month are covered and all of your expenses for next month. What I have done so far is to budget more on each bill and building a cushion for each bill. Okay. Yeah, budget more for each bill. Yeah, I think that's smart. Instead of having, individual tips for things that you're doing, just focusing on expanding the cost of each one in the budget and then just kind of making yourself fill in the rest with your discretionary spending. Yeah, that's cool. And also not having some habits. For example, I don't smoke. Okay, good point. What habits could you eliminate to save money? So you're saying you don't smoke, but if I would have to buy cigarettes, so now I could just put this money away. Yes, winky face. Yeah, that's a great point. So what habits could you add that would be helpful? What habits could you subtract that would be helpful? So that's a great point. Okay, so what is the one next step? We talked about that. Okay, the last prompt for session 2 is, do I need support from other people to accomplish this goal? If so, who? And if so, how can I get their support? So a lot of the times we'll set goals that really do require some assistance from other people. A common one is, if you are a parent and you need to work out more and you want to go to the gym 3 times a week, it requires your spouse's input to be able to, watch the kids for that time being, so that way you can do, your work towards your goal. So, finances could be similar. There might be things, that you need support from people on. Maybe it is getting support from your friends about not going out to eat so much or changing up those habits that you regularly do together in order to save money. So just thinking through, whose input do I need in order to accomplish this? I don't have a problem with putting money away, but I just always end up spending it on something. So you save money, so your balance goes up, and then you find something to spend it on. I think that's really common, if that's what you mean. I've noticed that a lot too. People are actually usually pretty good about setting some money aside. It's just then, trying to get used to having that money and not spending it. That's a mental challenge for sure. Kind of making sure that money is set aside in your brain. I don't know if that makes sense, but mentally separating it so that it's money that you're not going to touch. And this would kind of be like the 2000 is the new zero kind of rule, where, if I had $2,500 in my bank account, in my checking account, I created a habit of just minusing 2000 every single time. So like that money isn't there. So I only really have 500 is kind of how I would think of it. Okay, let's go ahead and get into session 2. Once again, feel free to drop questions in the comments. Work on any projects that you have, or work through the prompt, which is pick 3 to 5 of the ideas to commit to. Think about what actions and habits you need to accomplish that. Think of the one next step for each item, and then who you need support from in order to achieve the goal. All right, with that, let's get into it. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay. End of work session 2. How did it go? What'd you guys work on? We did have a few comments come in. Helpful, I'm glad. Mandaraj, I used to borrow from other savings account when I got jammed up. That money never got repaid. I want to stop doing that, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Yeah, it makes sense. It's on one hand, it's a good thing, if you're able to set money aside, that's kind of like proof of concept, you're able to establish that habit. So that's a good thing. And, it's something that I think a lot of us work on, just trying to make sure that money is, just set aside for the purpose that we had it set aside for. And I find having flexibility in your income helps with that as well. Like maybe having 10% of your income, not necessarily for miscellaneous, because I try to keep miscellaneous less than like 1 or 2%, just because, we want to make sure that we are accounting for everything and being responsible for the categories we set, but just making sure in general that we have, like a 10% gap between income and expenses. That helps cover those things that come up, so that way you don't need to raid your savings. But yeah, it's hard. Yes, same. Relatable. Okay, session 3. Session 3, help, I've fallen off the wagon and I can't get up. So this is a tip that I found on research about goals as well. So this is not my tip, but I heard of a study where they found that people are more successful with staying on track for their goals and are more likely to accomplish them if at the start of the goal, they identify their plan for getting back on the wagon, essentially. Things come up. We all get off track sometimes, whether that is, like a costly emergency that comes up that we hadn't planned for, loss of motivation, just being exhausted. Like if you have a very taxing job and home life, it can that can get you off track for your goals. So just coming up with a written plan for what you're going to do if you do fall off the wagon, if you stopped your habits, like if you identified 1 or 2 habits to help you save money, if you fall off those habits, what to do to pick them back up again. And so really the prompt for this next and final session will be identifying what obstacles are you most likely to face? What obstacles are most likely to get you off track from achieving your financial goals? And then, how can you overcome those and minimize those obstacles? What actions will I take to get momentum back? And some ideas for that would be reevaluating the goal. Say, if I fall off of this goal, I'll reevaluate it and make it a little easier. So maybe if you say I want to be 1 month ahead by September 1st, maybe you make it October 1st. So just reevaluating the goal in general. Extending the deadline, phone a friend. Say if I lose motivation for this goal, I'll call my frugal friend, Rebecca, and chat with her, and that'll help me feel motivated again. Finding an accountability buddy is good. Watching motivational videos or content. Maybe scheduling a no-spend day. If you've never done one, just like one day. Reviewing your why statement. So I kind of alluded to this at the beginning. Sometimes we don't really identify like the real reason we're trying to do something. So just evaluating why and trying to come up with a why statement that's really compelling and inspiring. That way you're like pulled towards the goal instead of like trying to push yourself towards the goal. So that's the prompt for session 3. So just coming up with a get back on the wagon plan. If you are just hopping on, we're going to do a 5-minute silent work session. We'll regroup after that and share, what we came up with. Feel free to work on what you have to work on, or the prompt, how to get back on track. And with that, let's go ahead and get back into it. Work session number 3. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay. And to work session 3, how did it go? You guys have any questions for me? So we did, what's your wagon plan? Did you guys come up with any other ideas for kind of how to regain momentum after having lost it? I was thinking about, especially with like a health related goal, people are kind of resistant to taking small actions, but small actions are really important for building and keeping momentum. So a lot of people will say like, well, what's the point of doing one push-up when, that's not gonna, after doing one push-up, I'm not gonna have my goal of losing 20 pounds or whatever. But I really think that tiny actions are important just to help us feel like we accomplished something. And I think that down the road, that leads to us feeling more empowered to start doing other things. So some tiny actions in your finances might be just making a phone call that you have been dreading and putting off. It's hard to talk to people sometimes. So other tiny actions might be just like trying out a new frugal recipe. I try to find new recipes where each of the ingredients costs less than $1 per pound. So that's kind of my threshold for kind of frugal recipes and which ones to try. Common things that are less than $1 a pound, and it depends on where you live. But so for Audrey in New York, this might not apply to you, but like potatoes, a lot of times you can get like a 15-pound bag of potatoes for like $3 or $4. So essentially, that's like 5 pounds for $1. I'm not good at math. Shouldn't be doing math in my own head. But just those tiny little actions can help to get us back on track and can help to keep us on track. So just wanted to mention that, don't dismiss little things because I think that little things can be actually more helpful for our finances. The other thing I wanted to mention is, our emotions can affect our spending. And a lot of the times people will say, oh, there's nothing that I can cut from my spending. But ultimately, we usually do have room to cut. It's just cutting things that we think that we need. An example being, I remember being a kid and even though money was tight, I remember my mom would always buy like a soda and a candy bar while grocery shopping. And, it's just a little thing. But just like her justification was that she needed it because she was exhausted, and she was from, dealing with, 6 kids and grocery shopping and so just thinking of those kinds of situations as opportunities to better manage our emotions, because, our emotions can affect our spending. So anything that we can do to be more aware of the emotions that we have, the times when we are feeling exhausted or lonely or sad, and even happy. Like Mr. Finance Rocks says sometimes that he'll spend more when he's feeling happy, just because, he's, I don't even know how to describe it. Just like the feeling of happiness makes him like want to spend money more. On a roll, I guess. Yes, I'm currently reading that book, Tiny Habits. Love it. Atomic Habits? Or are you talking about Tiny Habits, or what's that the other habit book? Maybe Tiny Habits is a book. But yeah, and that's where ultimately I realized that is reading those books that, whatever your goal is, those tiny habits, those tiny actions build up and help you to achieve big goals. Even though it can be hard to connect them sometimes, right? Like this tiny action is going to get me to this big goal, but really they do. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's all I have for you. What was the most helpful takeaway from this session? To recap, we talked about defining our financial goals, so making sure that they're specific and measurable. We did a brainstorming session. What could I do to make more money and spend less money? Came up with some action plans and strategized what we might actually do to save more money. And then the wagon plan. I don't know what else to call it. I know it's silly to say that. The wagon plan, or recovery planning, what to do if you fall off the wagon. So hopefully that was helpful to you guys. Future sessions, Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time for my local friends. And yeah, feel free to drop a comment if you have suggestions for future videos. And I'll let you guys go. Thank you so much for staying on. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next week. Bye.